Hey, Brett, it's James West. Good to see you. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, good to see you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. So, welcome everyone to episode 71 of the Invest with James West podcast series. Today, we'll be straddling both the telecom infrastructure and renewable energy sectors as we sit down with the CEO of the leading national independent contractor, or a leading of repair, maintenance, services, and engineering in the U.S. Founded in 1998, Pearce Services has over 2,000 team members working across 24 locations in the U.S. and handles some 150,000 site dispatches per year. For its Pearce Services segment, customers from the TMT industry include major wireless carriers and cell tower owners, network, cable providers, and utilities. And for its Pearce Renewables business, it caters to OEMs and renewable asset owners across wind, solar, EV charging, and energy storage. Prior to co-founding investment firm Wilquest Partners, Bret was the CEO of Pitfalls, an outsourced provider of data management and email remarketing for the lead generation industry. And prior to Pitfalls, he was vice president with Sarant Capital, a private equity firm investing in emerging service and technology businesses. Before joining Sarant, Bret was an operations manager and then client development manager at Service Source, a technology support sales organization, where he led the international expansion of the company. Bret was also a strategy consultant with McKinsey. He holds an MBA and bachelor's from Stanford University and is currently the CEO of Pearce Services and chairman of the board of Precision Aerospace. So thanks again for joining me today, Bret. This seems to be a very interesting business, but perhaps two somewhat uncorrelated end markets.
Yeah, it's just a fascinating business. What we almost coming at this is private equity guys, right? We built a portfolio of assets here against some really great market tailwinds, and the business is actually our all critical infrastructure. And as we go through the interview, I think you'll get a sense of how incredibly closely related the work really is between the various different end markets that we're in.
Great. Well, maybe before we get into the business, what's the high level on Pearce, and can you talk a little about its history?
And so the business was founded in 1998. I actually joined in 2014 when we got some family offices together to acquire the business from a retiring founder. And the founder was based in Paso Robles, kind of before the wine industry got there, and it's really a rodeo town. And he was a great roper, and we called him a literal and figurative cowboy. And a lot of the early guys in the company came out of the roping community there and could fix just about anything with their hands. And I'll tell you, my partner Ben and I, when we got into the business, just so impressed with the talent and quality of workmanship that those guys had, and the amount of hustle to get up early and get the job done. And so we affectionately now call the business Silicon Valley meets the rodeo, because I think we learned a ton from each other, and it really became the foundation of the culture of the business. This idea of mutual respect. And in today's world, how do you get somebody from South Oklahoma in the middle of the country with a certain set of hands-on skills to work with a software developer in Silicon Valley? And we managed to make that happen. And I think that's some of the magic that comes out of the very early days of the business.
Great. Well, I'm making my way through Yellowstone right now, so I have a certain affinity for cowboys and roping capabilities. I have none of my own, unfortunately. so I'm probably out of your hiring base, but it's given me definitely a much better perspective on cowboys. Well, so I can appreciate the repair, maintenance, service business, given it's always steady, recurring revenue streams. What do you think made the business so attractive in the eyes of Wilquest Partners and you, and maybe more recently New Mountain Capital?
Yeah, I think from a business model standpoint, having been in private equity, it checks all the boxes, right? You've got recurring multi-year contracted revenue, relatively asset light. We do obviously have trucks that folks drive in, but not a bunch of heavy iron out there. And it's diversified across a set of very compelling growth markets. To be in fiber, solar, battery, EV, wind. It's in our mind kind of where the market is growing, and we've purposefully steered it in that direction.
Okay, well, if we kind of think about your broad geographic footprint in the U.S., some of the proprietary technology and analytics and the expertise your technicians have, what do you think has been a source of differentiation for Pearce?
That's a great question. I think, I sort of think about the business in three chapters. Before I got involved in kind of the early 2000s, it was really about quality workmanship in the field and hustle. When we got involved in the business, and really built out the administrative and technology capabilities, we added to that workmanship kind of a layer of technology workflow automation at a time when there are very few field services packages that were any good. And so we built a lot of proprietary software within the business. And then we're able to provide, by doing that, automating a lot of the administrative aspects of the business to make our admin team much more efficient than everybody else. You then can take that data and provide analytics back to a customer and really help them think about their own assets and how to optimize their spend. And we're able to step into multi-year risk-based contracts and price them and understand them in ways that our competitors just had no idea how to even approach. When you think about New Mountain, they come in for chapter 3, which we're in now, and they saw the quality workmanship, they saw the data and analytics, but what they really saw, and we kind of shared this vision of a future of field services 2.0, where you could use this combination of different services we do, create a technology layer that simplifies a lot of the noise around it, so that you ultimately could have one technician that could go out and do an EV charging station PM in a parking lot, go up on the rooftop and do a solar panel PM, hit 2 rooftop units for Verizon and AT&T at the same time. And so what you're pulling together there is one truck roll for a lot of different services, and you create incredible density over time that I think is the key to field services in general.
Well, maybe let's start on Pearce Services. I do want to spend a lot of time on the renewables business, as it's an area coinciding, of course, with the energy transition. But if we start with Pearce Services in your end markets, what are the spending cycles like, if any, for your wireline, telecom infrastructure customers?
Help me understand the question. The spending cycles. What do you mean by that?
I guess the up and downs of the spending cycles, how dynamic are they? Are they more consistent? What do you see? Is there I guess a recurring maintenance part to that cycle, or preventative maintenance?
2 parts of the business. We actually over time built out an engineering business so that we could be better thought partners with our clients, and then ultimately kind of be that partner that owns the asset for the long term. And we don't physically own it, but we take that kind of ownership mentality. And so on the engineering side of the business, there's, think about a network where you're out touching 100 million type users. I mean, this is the telephone network, right? And so constant moves, adds, changes that you're designing. And so our engineering business goes on those moves, add, changes. You add a new lane to a highway, you got to move all the telephone poles over and re-engineer it, right? There's also a big fiber build going on as more and more businesses want fiber, homes want fiber, et cetera. On the maintenance side of our business in telecom, which is, they're kind of split half and half, the maintenance side, air conditioners break, they're old, generators break, they're old, they need preventative maintenance. Anytime you have a drop call or kind of your phone slows down in an area that has plenty of cell towers and you scratch your head and wonder why, well, some new software patch, could be a loose connector, it could be an ice storm that breaks something, and our guys are out there fixing it all the time. So very consistent on that end.
Okay, got it. And are there any structural or perhaps even demographic trends that support the fundamental outlook for the Pearce Services business?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think everybody's pretty clear that people want more data. We're doing this on video instead of on the phone, which we probably wouldn't have done even a few years ago. And so I think that's a given for most people. Now, the question is, how does that specifically impact us? Well, as you continue to roll out more fiber into the network, there's obviously an engineering component to that. On the maintenance side, when you think about what 5G really means, if we're going to get to a high frequency, really, really fast 5G type deployment, you're talking about, I've seen estimates 4 or 5x the number of ultimate antenna nodes. Are called small cells, but you need 4 or 5 times the number of small cells that you do that all the macro towers that are out there today. So you're talking about an explosion in the amount of equipment that needs to be maintained and repaired. You're getting the antenna much closer to the phone in order to shorten that distance, which means more fiber needs to go out and get those antennas closer to the phone. So in both regards, a lot more to maintain over time we see coming down the pipe.
Well, great. And that's a nice tailwind. As I mentioned, I do want to talk about the renewable side since it's so close to kind of my coverage at my home. So on Pearce Renewables, we think you're operating in areas that are seeing a tremendous amount of activity inflection, whether it's EVs or energy storage, solar, and wind. So maybe just starting with EV charging and those customers there, what services are you providing?
Yeah, so for EV charging, we're really primarily maintenance and repair, just like we're doing in the telecom business. So when you think about an air conditioning technician going and doing a few preventative maintenance visits a day to different cell towers around the neighborhood, very similar going and doing a few preventative maintenance visits to several EV charging stations in the area, and then being on call for any kind of repairs that come on down the road. Now within EV, because we're really a partner to our clients, if they need help on a campaign to go clean up a bunch of sites, or if they've got a bunch of sites that other construction vendors are building and they want us to come commission them to make sure that they're really working before we take true ownership of them, then we'll help them out with that as well.
Okay, makes sense. And then maybe as a follow-up, because EV charging is so new and we're hearing a lot of conflicting things about it, what are the common pitfalls facing the EV charging industry today, and what kind of solutions are experiencing rapid uptake, and kind of how does Pearce fit into that?
That's a great question. And we talked a little bit about in the telecom market how we realized after being in the maintenance world for several years that we really need to be in engineering, because that's how you become the thought partner and really create that feedback loop where what you see in reality in the field gets put back into the designs. And we're seeing that in EV as well, where there's a lot of unproven equipment out there that people are trying out. And what we're doing when we're out doing maintenance, we're collecting data on what's really failing, what's working. We're able to feed that back to our clients to get better reliability over time. But we're also even seeing right now, we need to stock some of these parts that we know are going to fail because of our predictive analytics, and with the supply chains where they are right now, that's becoming really important. And it's not necessarily our business, but it's one of those things we do for our clients to make sure that we can keep reliable uptime. That's kind of the unproven piece, right? But there's a second kind of interesting trend where you're seeing large scale OEMs now getting into cars, because you have a chicken and egg problem with more cars, more chargers, right? And I think people saw Tesla and say, wait a second, maybe I need to build cars and create an entire network of EV chargers as well. I think folks now we're starting to see are backing away from that idea. I think they appreciate how complicated it is to build a great EV vehicle, as well as building great chargers and charging infrastructure. And so what we really are picking is a very, very narrow part of the value chain where we're going to be exceptionally good at it, because we bring a lot to bear in terms of best practices from doing exactly the same thing in other industries. There's a third piece of this, and I'd say the other big trend we're seeing by the day is a lot of focus early on consumer, because that's where all the hype was. But now people are really seeing the opportunity within fleet. And so there's a big migration of focus, I would say. And I can't say that there's massive dollars yet, but you can see it coming, where people are looking at fleet. And the implication for charging is really quite different, because you're talking about lots of dollars of lost revenue if there's downtime on a fleet. And so the level of SLAs, you have that real tight trade-off now between, if my charger is down, I lose X dollars an hour, and therefore it is worth it to proactively maintain and repair an incredibly fast SLA. And so we're seeing, we already provide, services for the largest level 3 charging networks out there. But for some of the other folks that have used kind of a lot of local vendors, where they use an electrician who can come do a cheap, part of service, what they're seeing is that in order to get consistency, because some of them are fantastic, but a lot of them aren't, and then it's a whole issue of trying to manage consistency, right? And so in the fleet world, the customers are saying, no, that's not acceptable. And so they need the consistency, the level of service. They need the analytics that we bring. They need the real-time data analytic portal where you can log in and see everything that's happening at all times. And so that value, I think, is really even more important in fleet.
That makes some sense. And we're hearing, of course, on our side a lot about fleet and them getting ready for the electrification here. Maybe now on solar, you guys provide looks like a pretty comprehensive list of services, whether it's maintenance, inverter services, retrofits, even land management. Is this type of offering considered above average in terms of its breadth? And why does the industry need this one-stop shop approach?
Yeah, I mean, we really don't do any of the construction. There's a lot of big EPCs out there that do a great job designing and building these things, but once it's online, people want to call somebody and solve the problem, right? Our clients don't think about, listen, I put millions and millions of dollars to this, and I've got now 100,000 zip ties that are all cracking, right? And that's my fundamental problem, right? But they just say there's a problem and I need somebody who can fix it. And they don't want to call 5 different people to try and get that answer. And so when it comes to keeping, to maximizing charging, and ultimately doing it at as efficient a cost as humanly possible, that's where we come in. So we can solve the zip tie problem, but we can also, we have an O&M solution where we can work with an investment firm who, gets a developer to develop, and then they want to pass it to us to operate the asset going forward.
Okay, interesting.
But I think last thing I would say on that's interesting. We're also seeing a lot of clients. There's kind of a new trend, I would say, where you have clients, especially utilities, that have a lot of, you're familiar, obviously, James, with some of the oil and gas assets, or other refineries or gas turbine generation, and they've got very sophisticated remote operation centers. They know how to operate assets. The problem for them is they might have a bunch of assets in one geographic territory, or they might kind of have density in a certain area. They might understand how to run certain types of assets, but they have some outpost of a new solar farm that's 1,000 miles away, and they're thinking about, gosh, do I really want to hire 20 people and manage them, and I don't have any other assets in that area, and that's where they're coming to us, where they can operate it and we can come and maintain it.
Okay. So any other noticeable recent trends for the solar business, or any customer strategies in terms of procurement or recycling or upgrades, inventory management that you're noticing?
Yeah, I mean, with all the excitement in the solar industry, what you're seeing is a lot of different types of owners come into the market. You can have financial firms, you can have utilities, you can have dedicated renewable energy asset owners, each with a slightly different kind of breadth of service offering, or kind of how much ownership they want to take on that asset, what they want to do. At the same time, a solar installation is a little different from wind, where usually one OEM kind of can give you everything. In solar, you have a lot of different OEMs coming together. You have an EPC that builds it, and there are a lot of EPCs in the game. And so it's a very fragmented industry with a lot of technology built in a lot of different ways. Owners want slightly different types of things. And so there still hasn't been that kind of level of consolidation that we first saw in telecom. Then, we're starting to see in wind with, 3 OEMs that really have consolidated quite a bit of it. And, solar is still very widely spread. And so, one of the trends, we see is there's still, I think we see clients that are very focused on, how do I get an individual job done better, faster, cheaper, but very few clients. I mean, we see some, but very few that are thinking strategically about, how do I bundle assets to truly drive waste out of the system, as opposed to, one individual job. So I think that'll start to come, because we've seen that happen in the other markets we're in. The other piece, I think it's obvious to everybody, it's just a massive shortage of talent. I mean, and we'll talk about this more in the wind, business as well, and battery, but you just can't find a solar tech who knows what they're doing. It's sort of ready and willing to move to a very rural area and be maintaining it. So you got to really train your own and put a lot of investment in that.
Maybe that's a good segue into wind power. You do provide a comprehensive service here. How have you been able to adapt to the rapid change in wind turbine products and project installations? And then how are you managing through kind of are you seeing companies manage through supply chain headwinds? We've seen some high profile, negative earnings revisions for some companies because of supply chain. And how can you help?
Yeah, it's a couple of great questions here. I'll hit the kind of evolution of technology. I mentioned training in my earlier comment. I mean, that is a huge, huge deal for us, being a dedicated, focused O&M business. We have a couple of large training facilities already. We're talking about building a new one in Dallas this year that we're very excited about. We got a lot of equipment that OEMs will provide us, and then they'll even send their people into our centers for training. We've got, a really cool kind of, big van that rides around the country with a mobile training unit. So you come inside and it's got some equipment in the walls so we can train people locally. We've supplemented, COVID was actually kind of one of the bits of lemonade that we made out of a bunch of lemons is really advancing what we do from a virtual training standpoint. And this isn't the kind of stuff you can purely virtual train, but you can do some virtual and then make sure that we get people doing real hands-on training with real equipment. So that's kind of how we keep up with it. And we actually just released a pretty neat little thing you might appreciate, which is, every technician now has a QR code, links back to our certifications database so they can roll up to a site and, a site manager from our clients can say, wait, what do you really know? And, they take a look at the QR code, it has all their safety certs and all their, OEM certifications as well. So, we're trying to make it tight. We're trying to make it easy. It's part of this sort of field services 2.0 type concept that you just don't see from a lot of traditional field services businesses. The second piece of the question is a little different, the supply chain piece. That really is primarily our clients that are working through that. You're seeing the large OEMs, really try and figure it out. I think born out of necessity, we started a parts distribution business simply because, our clients, you can't do maintenance if you can't get the parts. So in order to keep our engines turning, we had to make sure that we had parts available when people need them.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, maybe let's spend a bit of time on one of my favorite verticals. I think one where you're seeing, some emerging trends, energy storage. So, we have things like thermal runaway, project management, maintenance, and warranty are really common issues here. How do you get involved? What have been some recent trends in your end markets? And I know that your telecom expertise, because in our prior conversations, you've mentioned this has helped in this emerging area.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so excited about this. And for all the talk of the other industry, there is more money going into real projects right now in battery than we see just about anywhere else. It's incredible the flow that's happening because it's one of those industries that's so simple. People have known for a long time that if you buy low and sell high, it's a good business model, and because of that simplicity, it just kind of works, right? There's maybe a little less complexity than some of the other end markets we're in. And I'd love to say that we had a premonition and we saw this all coming and we built all the parts strategically, but honestly, it kind of fell into our business in that we had our solar teams out working with their clients and started to pick up battery business. We actually had our HVAC teams starting to pick up business completely independently because our HVAC teams are working with all the OEMs of HVAC equipment. We're the warranty provider for all the major ones that, serve the telecom industry. Well, it turns out it's the exact same ones that are serving the battery industry, right? And so we're already working with them on one side, getting introduced. And this year we pulled those teams together, into one cohesive battery services team. And we're really the only person that has actual scale in both. Right. And you absolutely need both. You need the power electronics side and you need the cooling side in order to be successful in operating one of these assets going forward. So, when you look at the maintenance and repair requirements to keep these up and running, the batteries themselves are actually, and oftentimes they're hermetically sealed, right? So there's not a ton of maintenance hours. It's real. You need the expertise more to understand if something's going wrong. Where the time investment is going to come is in the inverter. It's going to come in the HVAC unit and making sure filters are clean and all this kind of stuff. You're putting pretty sophisticated equipment into pretty harsh environments, and you really need that. And the other thing we're seeing here is in battery. I mean, people are coming to us and saying, "Hey, by the way, we need 50 fully trained technicians ready to go next week." And we've got 10 installations going on at the same time. You need to be able to help us. And, at first we take a big gulp because there are no fully trained battery technicians out there. And then we say, wait a second, we're already serving 30,000 HVAC units across telecom towers in the United States. On one side, we're already, and in many cases, we're already either maintaining or operating the solar farm that's sitting right next to the deployment we're about to go help out. And so we can bring those two together, quickly turn up a team that's got all the relevant experience already, and our clients are helping us kind of get trained up on their specific types of equipment so we can be right there with them. But it's a very rare situation to have the expertise and the capacity in both cases. Right now, it's so much the wild, wild west, and I think we're all learning a lot. We're understanding what's actually getting into the field, and coming back to kind of the early days of telecom again, right? We were kind of in the maintenance and repair area. We got into engineering because you want to complete that feedback loop. Here, we're starting to consult with our clients more and more. They're focused on battery capacity. They're focused on the economics. They're focused on space constraints, et cetera. The thermal management side, it's not as much of a focus, right? And so, we've got a lot of that experience. And the problem they're having is there's so many different types of environments these are going into that are pretty different. And so you kind of build what you think you're going to need, and then the equipment all gets there. And then our people are coming in and saying, helping in the commissioning process and saying, wait a second, we need to change around these designs a little bit. Otherwise, you're going to have a real problem on your hands going forward.
Right. Are you seeing any specific energy storage technologies that are taking a lead in the U.S., or perhaps any interesting business models that are experiencing increased adoption?
I think this is a great time for a quick plug for your primer on the energy transition. No, honestly, I made our whole team read it because I think it's probably the best holistic overview of the different technologies that are happening in real time.
We appreciate that.
It's good. If folks listeners haven't read it, they absolutely should. If you're thinking about kind of what is happening, I think it is aggressive to say that anyone has a dominant position at this point in time, given how new things are and how much things are changing. Even betting on lithium is a winning technology, even though it's the vast majority of deployments that we're seeing today. I think if COVID's taught us one thing, it's expect the unexpected when it comes to global supply chain. So we'll see what happens, and I'd love to debate it with you over a beer sometime. But I think from a business perspective, I think one of the things we learned long ago is you can build a lot of fancy technology, but once it gets into these harsh, dusty climates, it's going to break, and somebody's going to need to go fix it.
Right, fair enough. Well, so you have two, if not more, kind of diverse or different end markets and a variety of customers. How do you continue to drive operational excellence? Is there anything you learned on the telecom side that you've been able to successfully apply to the renewables side?
That's another good question. I think I'll start with what we've learned. What we've learned is the real profile of our clients, which is pretty much identical across all of our end markets. It's somebody who has a distributed set of mission critical assets, often unmanned. So you're talking about trying to manage a very large geographically dispersed portfolio of mission critical assets, and it's very different from other types of assets. We just don't compete for, call it a small business owner. They have an HVAC unit. When it breaks, they want Bret to come, right? And they want to say hi. They know the guy, they trust him, and you do the job, you bill it, etc. The problem is our clients need consistency across thousands and thousands of sites. You're talking broad geographic territories, and something goes down at 2 o'clock in the morning, and they need to be able to log into our portal and be able to see in real time. Tech's on his way. Tech's accepted the job. Tech uploaded all their photos and scope of work and all the parts they used, and so they can go back to sleep. And then when they wake up in the morning, they got data analytics they can bring to their peers about optimization of their assets, and that's how they're going to get promoted, right? And it's a different kind of experience when you bring that whole set of value compared to your one-off local type maintenance job. So that's what's very similar across the solar clients, wind clients, and telecom. From an operational excellence standpoint, at this point, we've seen a lot of different formats of maintenance and repair type services, and even some of our engineering workflows. And so, in many ways, we've got a menu of options. We have custom technology, right? So we've got now a menu of options where you can say, okay, use this set of technology and processes if it's a 3 jobs a day, you need route density and a dispatch solution, use this technology if it's a 1-week job, and it's more about flying people and getting all the tools and parts to arrive there at the same time, right? And so with that, we can bring in a new service, or a client asks us, hey, I want to try this program out. We can ramp that up really quickly with its own custom technology package and a set of processes to go with it and drive that way. So I think that's an important piece of the puzzle. The most important piece of the puzzle comes back to this kind of joke I said earlier, is it's Silicon Valley meets the rodeo, right? If you have the right culture, you have the analytics, you have the quality of workmanship in the field. I think that just helps you get the best leaders and the best technicians, and they embrace the culture that I'm talking about, because I think it's something that's lacking for people right now, and I think they love it, and I think that, and they see this vision for field services 2.0. I mean, it's just a very rare combination.
Well, during one of our earlier conversations, you had raised some interesting implications for heating, ventilation, air conditioning markets, regarding climate change. Could you maybe elaborate for our audience on that, and where do you see the puck moving for Pearce's opportunity set?
Yeah, I think I was referring, when we were talking before, I was referring mainly to our HVAC and generator business.
Right. Yeah.
It's the problem with maintenance is that it doesn't go away. It's not that exciting to invest in if you're a client. It's more fun to get the new snazzy toy and technology, or the next salesperson can bring in revenue. But you got to maintain what you have, and I think sometimes people's minds start to drift away from that. And but more recently, what we've seen is just the frequency of natural disasters of all different types. Tornadoes where they're not supposed to be, ice storms, hurricanes, etc. It very quickly shifts the focus back to, let's make sure if this is really mission critical, we're going to maintain it properly, and we're going to do what needs to be done. So we're seeing that refocusing, I would say, particularly last year in California, all these power outage events, they're called PSPS events in California. Everybody wanted to talk about generators for the next year, right? But I think what we're seeing, we'll see how it evolves, but my hypothesis in battery is that it's going to be particularly acute, because you think about it, a lot of solar and wind owners getting into the business, and they're used to operating in very specific environments, wind in a kind of a, stormy, windy, cold environment, solar in a, very hot, dusty environment. But the thing about battery is it can go anywhere, right? I mean, anywhere in the country. So, it's a little bit more like what we're seeing in the telecom business, where you need snowcats when you need to get up to mountaintops. You need, special corrosion resistance when you're near ocean air that's going to come in, and you need different things for cotton fields. We have pythons that sit inside. I mean, it's everything. Bullet holes. We've seen everything. And I think that is one of those that's going to be a little bit different, probably, for folks that aren't as familiar, and they're starting to place assets now all over the country when they might have been more kind of geographically focused before.
Okay, well, last kind of one for me. How should we think about the evolution from, just-in-time manufacturing to just-in-time engineering? Is this something occurring in markets, or is the dynamic applying to a much broader set of industries?
I think I had mentioned that just-in-time engineering. It's almost more of a joke within our business than a true sort of evolution. But
Sure.
I think what we're saying is, it's almost controlled chaos, right? You have, particularly in battery, we're seeing it where the technology evolution is going from kind of quarterly rev changes to monthly. I mean, it's happening so fast, and the growth is so intense. On the flip side, the supply chains are going from weeks to quarters, right? And so we're seeing things arrive that we're supposed to kind of help commission, so they get installed, right? And then we're going to commission them. Well, the process between when something ships from the other side of the world, it actually lands in the United States, and it gets called from rural China to rural United States, then gets finally, all the equipment actually gets installed, right? Now you turn on, okay, let's make sure this thing works. Well, there's 4 or 5 tech design revisions that have happened in that intervening period. And so I think what we're going to see is with all the different types of equipment going out there, if you're a large asset owner, you've used multiple different system integrators, maybe, used an EPC to try that, a couple options, 20 different design rev changes from each of them. I think we're going to kind of wake up with a little bit of a hangover in a year or two and say, what did we just build? And nobody has any idea what's out there. And so I think it's going to become critically important to be, very carefully logging information on what actually is there, the configurations that are actually there, getting that feedback loop going again, and making sure that we're really tracking that for our clients. That data is going to become really important.
Well, Bret, this has been great. I certainly learned a lot. I'm sure our audience did as well. Any final messages you want to deliver to the audience and myself about Pearce?
It's exciting. This is obviously a little bit of a plug anyway, but
Go for
it. To people starting their career, people thinking about changing their career. I had a friend that was in Glasgow for the climate change conference. And I do think that, I really do feel that as business people and leaders, it's our responsibility to work on climate change. And, it's not only does it make sense for, I think, an existential crisis, but it's a phenomenal career opportunity. We're looking at growth that's going to go on for, 20, 30 years. My first job, I remember, was consulting for a large oil and gas company. And I remember running the model as a young guy, and you're rounding things off to the nearest billion. And when you see that kind of capital start to shift, into renewable energy and, all the communications that go along with it, I just think it's an incredible place to be for the future. And, we're figuring out how to help people really build long-term careers. So, plug for the industry, I would guess we need more talent. There's a huge shortage.
Fair enough. Well, Bret, this has been great today. Thanks so much for joining me, and I look forward to watching your progress and catching up again soon.
Thanks again. Looking forward to it.